In English, to express obligation, saying how important it is to do something, there are modal verbs. You can think of modal verbs as helping verbs. Small verbs which help to give meaning to the main verb in a sentence. But don't worry, modal verbs is a grammar word. You don't need to remember it. I'm Rob from 4 Words, and today we're going to look at some of the more useful modal verbs for expressing obligation.
4 Words. Must.
Must is used to express strong obligation. When we use must, we are saying that something is important, necessary, essential. If someone says you must do something, then you have no choice. For example, all employees must wear a uniform. You must complete the report by Friday.
Have to.
Have to is another modal verb which expresses obligation, similar to must, but not as strong. Have to is often used to describe responsibilities or duties. For example, I have to attend a meeting this afternoon. She has to sign the contract before we proceed. Before we move on, let's compare must and have to, because something strange happens when we make them negative. So as we have seen, must and have to have similar meanings, just must is a bit stronger. But when we make them negative, the meanings change. Must not, or mustn't usually in spoken English. If you say must not when you're speaking, you sound a bit like a robot, or you're really being strong. You must not. Must not or mustn't describes something which is not allowed. It's forbidden. You absolutely cannot do it. You mustn't. But the negative of have to, don't have to, or do not have to, but more commonly, don't have to, is different. Don't have to describes something which is optional. You can choose. You can do that thing, but you don't have to. So if you don't want to do it, fine, no problem. So look, must, have to, mustn't, don't have to, completely different in the negative. Weird, right? That's English. Let's look at some examples. Let's take the same sentence, one with mustn't and one with don't have to compare. You mustn't come to work if you are feeling sick. So if you're feeling sick, it's forbidden to go to the office. Do not do it. Maybe the boss is worried about your sickness spreading to your colleagues. Maybe your boss is concerned about you and he or she wants you to stay at home, not work, recover. You don't have to come to work if you're feeling sick. In this one, it's your choice. It's up to you. If you're feeling sick, you can go to the office or you can stay at home. The boss is flexible.
Need to.
Need to is similar to have to, and it expresses the importance of something. For example, we need to increase our sales figures this quarter. You need to submit your expense report before the end of the month. And the negative of need to is don't need to or needn't. And this is similar to don't have to. But whereas with don't have to, it's about being optional, needn't talks about necessity. And if someone says you needn't do something, they're really advising you, nah, you needn't do it. There's no point. Why bother? For example, you don't need to worry about the printing costs. You've already allocated enough budget. You needn't attend the meeting tomorrow. It's about a project which you are not involved with.
Should.
Should describes advice, recommendation, or expectation. It is used to say something is desirable, but not necessary. It's also used to give suggestions or offer opinions. For example, you should proofread your emails before sending them. We should invest in new technology to improve our efficiency. Should in the negative is should not or in spoken English, shouldn't. And it's about advice or recommendations about what not to do. You shouldn't make a decision without consulting the team first. You shouldn't give employees negative feedback in front of their co-workers. It destroys morale.
Ought to.
Ought to is very similar to should. It expresses advice, recommendation, expectation. But the extra thing about ought to is it's often about what is morally right, what is the right thing to do. For example, we ought to offer more training opportunities to our employees. We ought to see what we can do to reduce our carbon footprint in the manufacturing process. And the negative of ought to is ought not to. Oughtn't to does exist, but it's really not very common because it's a bit difficult to say, especially for British English speakers who often don't pronounce the T in the middle of a word. Oughtn't to, oughtn't to. It's oughtn't to. It's quite an awkward word to say, oughtn't to. We ought not to make any major decisions without consulting the stakeholders first. We ought not to use this supplier. They waste loads of plastic in their packaging. So there you go. If you have to improve your English, improve your communication skills for success at work, then you should follow us here at 4 Words for more business English communication skills building tips. See you next time.